Shalom, everybody. Time for the 28th portion of my teaching on Elijah. I'm going to call this the beginning of the end. Then spake Elisha unto the woman whose son he had restored to life, saying, Arise and go thou and thy household, and sojourn wherever you can sojourn, for the Lord hath called for a famine, and it shall also come upon the land for 7 years. And the woman arose and did after the saying of the man of God. And she went with her household and sojourned in the land of the Philistines 7 years. And it came to pass at the 7 years' end that the woman returned out of the land of the Philistines, and she went forth to cry unto the king for her house and for her land. 2 Kings 8, 1-3. Elisha in this story is telling the faithful woman of the remnant to go into exile out of the Holy Land. She would have to leave her home and her little sanctuary apartment that she and her husband had built once for the prophet. And she would have to go to a foreign country. Why? Because the Lord had called for a famine to afflict Israel. Both the exile and the famine were portents of Israel's near future. The famine lasted 7 long years, and when it ended, the woman returned to the Holy Land, only to find that her home and land had been occupied in her absence. So she, servant of Elisha, had been discussing with the king his experiences with Elisha, including the resurrection of the widow's son. He looked up, and there she was, waiting to plead her case. I quote, And the king talked with Gehazi, the servant of the man of God, saying, Tell me, I pray thee, all the great things that Elisha hath done. And it came to pass, as he was telling the king how he had restored a dead body to life, that behold, the woman whose son he had restored to life cried out to the king for her house and for her land. And Gehazi said, My lord, O king, this is the woman, and this is her son, whom Elisha restored to life. And when the king asked the woman, she told him. So the king appointed unto her a certain officer, saying, Restore all that she has and had, and also all the fruits of the field, since the day that she left the land, even until now. 2 Kings 8, 4-7. Now, what would be the deeper message in this story? That for Israel, there will be a famine, of course, exile, and other horrors to come upon the chosen people. But the righteous are known and will be all right. Furthermore, there will be a restoration of all things one day for Israel. And like the miracle son of the woman of Shunammite, Israel herself will be resurrected by God and restored in a jubilee. This story also highlights a very positive story about Jehoram. He actually performs his role in this case as a restorer of justice and defenders of widows and orphans. Now, does this mean that there's hope for Israel? No, it doesn't. The wheels are already turning by this time, which will bring about the destruction of this sinful nation. Going all the way back to 1 Kings 19, when Elijah stood in the council of God on Mount Horeb, and where God revealed to him that Israel would be sent 3 messengers from God as a judgment upon them, Elisha, Hazael, and Jehu. Let me quote. And the Lord said unto him, Go, return on thy way to the wilderness of Damascus. And when you come, anoint Hazael to be king over Syria. And Jehu the son of Nimshi shalt thou anoint to be king over Israel. And Elisha the son of Shaphat of Abel-Meholah shalt thou anoint to be prophet in thy room. And it shall come to pass that him that escapes the sword of Hazael shall Jehu slay, and him that escapes from the sword of Jehu shall Elisha slay. 1 Kings 19, 15-17. Now it turned out that the first messenger would be Elisha, and he would come as a messenger of life and mercy. That's how they'd escape the sword. But the time had come now for the second and the third messenger. And Elisha came to Damascus, and Ben-Hadad, the king of Syria, was sick. And it was told him, saying, the man of God has come here. And the king said unto Hazael, Take a present in thy hand, and go meet the man of God, and inquire of the Lord by him, saying, Shall I recover of this disease? So Hazael went to meet him, and took a present with him, even of every good thing of Damascus, 40 camels burdened, and came and stood before him and said, Thy son Ben-Hadad, the king of Syria, had sent me to thee, saying, Shall I recover of this disease? And Elisha said unto him, Go say unto him, You may certainly recover. Howbeit the Lord has showed me that he will surely die. 2 Kings 8, 7 through 10. Now, first of all, the fact that Elisha is sent on a mission outside of the promised land is a sign of impending judgment upon Israel. The nation itself would soon be sent out of the land. He goes to Damascus, where Ben-Hadad, the king of Syria, gives him the respect due a prophet of God, sending his servant Hazael to inquire of Elisha if he would recover of the sickness he was suffering with. Now, when Hazael found the prophet and inquired of his master, there's actually confusion rendered in the answer, especially in the King James Version. Elisha literally said to him, Say, not living, you shall live. And Yahweh shows me that dying, he shall die. That was the message. Why would there be confusion? Well, the commentator Jordan says that in Hebrew, the negative not sounds just like the prepositional phrase to him. So both words are pronounced lo. Well, I never knew that, but it makes sense. Therefore, it would be possible to interpret the answer of Elijah either way. You could say that he's not going to live, or you could say, don't say the king will live, or you could say, to him say the king will live, which is how Hazael received it, you see. But next, in this encounter with Hazael, Elisha began to cry profusely, just as Jesus would one day do when he rode into Jerusalem. And he settled his countenance steadfastly, the prophet did, until he was ashamed. And the man of God wept. And Hazael said, Why do you weep, my Lord? And he answered, Because I know the evil that you will do unto the children of Israel. Their strongholds will you set on fire. Their young men will you slay with the sword, and will dash their children, and rip up their women with child. And Hazael said, But what is your servant, a dog, that he should do this great thing? And Elisha answered, The Lord has showed me that you shall be king over Syria. 2 Kings 8, 11 through 14. Now Hazael went back to his king, Ben-Hadad, and reported that the prophet said, Living you shall live. But that night Hazael went into the king's chamber and smothered him to death with his pillow. Then he took the throne. The second messenger in judgment is now in place. Hazael would launch devastation and utter destruction on the cities of Israel as a judgment until it finally collapsed as a nation and went into captivity. Shalom, everybody.